We are. What's up, guys? We're gonna let everything get kicked in gear. Hopefully, everybody's safe tonight. We got some really bad weather coming through the area, but I even got the man still here, no matter what. So definitely appreciate Hayden coming on board tonight. So we're gonna just let everybody kind of get on board, and we'll start this party. So what all did you do today, Hayden?
Oh, ran errands. Finally in town for a week, so I tried to catch up on everything I needed to do.
Get a few people joining in here real quick. Let's see here where that number come in. What's up, Drew?
Yeah, there you
go. My bad. That's how I've always spelled it. John Mayo, Daniel. Scott
Key.
You can see this YouTube. This is Facebook.
Gotcha.
What we're going to talk about tonight, how's this guy been so dominating? Some of the keys to the hammer Hayden here. It's a lot of talk about this guy right now for a good reason. He's been really popping on the last. When was his first tournament? When was that, Hayden?
First tournament was March of 2019. 20? Should have been March of 2020. I fished a fruit jar on Ross Barnett. I fished a few prior to that, spider rigging.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's probably 15 years old, 16 years old.
I recall seeing Hayden with his dad spider rigging. Shoot, that was probably 6-7 years ago.
Probably so. I was 15, 16 years old.
He come by spider rigging with his dad in the infamous warfare hole. He was I actually recall that. Then Hayden and how we kind of hooked up was, I guess, 3 years ago. Hayden messaged me about crappie fishing, and we both really struck up a conversation on Ross Barnett crappie fishing, and I was like, man, I could really, use another guy working for me at the time, and I knew it would be a fun day when I could sit there and talk about crappie fishing all day with this guy. So I asked him if he needed a job.
And I just lost my job like 2 weeks prior to that.
Yeah.
So
he started work for me, and we, we built several tens of thousands bikes through the years.
For sure.
And, definitely become really good buddies through the years, and still get to fish a little bit here and there. And not as much as we want to. Hayden travels a lot, fishing tournaments, and now we both guide full time. So we see a lot of each other on the water, but, not every day building bikes, which is fun. Yeah. I'd much rather catch fish than
for sure.
Build bikes. But sure, we're getting a lot of questions already, which I appreciate everybody joining in tonight. This is definitely a good deal. There's a Dalco right there.
Dalco Turner.
Good evening, everybody. And if you got any kind of questions for Hayden, this is your shot. Don't let it down. This guy don't get on live too much here lately, but he's been on the podcast. How many podcasts you been on with me now?
Probably 5.
Probably 5 different
5 or
ones.
6.
2 or 3 little videos that we did. No, Hayden did one video with me, and we were casting for brush piles, and we whacked them pretty hard that day, and that video is still even on there. But if you got any kind of questions for him, like I said, this is the hottest guy in crappie fishing right now as far as, catching crappie at these different lakes. But we'll start out with the Red River, since I know that's really fresh on your mind.
Here comes our first question.
It's coming on in it. But kind of take it back, and when you started pre-fishing last week, what was your mindset going into a flooded river system and trying to pick out an area to go back to and actually do good on?
Yeah, so when they first announced that it was going to be on the Red River, immediately I thought, well, I'll just fish right there at the boat ramp where the Classic was won in 2021. And then he marked that off limits because he didn't want 50 boats fishing right there on top of each other. So first day of pre-fishing, I just went to the next best area that I had found when I was there. And the fish were there. I pulled in there and caught 11 or 12 pounds in about an hour. So I just pulled out of the area, went to the next area that I saw good fish the last time. Didn't really see much. Spent 3 or 4 hours the first day. It was raining. It was freezing cold. After about 4 hours, I was so cold I was ready to get off the water. Besides that one area, I never really saw anything on the river that struck an interest in me. You would see a good fish here or there, but it never was anything consistent. So the next day, I went out and pre-fished for about 3 hours. That was as much as I could take without getting too cold. Didn't even see a crappie. Didn't even catch a crappie. So I eliminated a lot of water that second day of practice. Third day, it was supposed to rain like 2 inches, and I was like, I'm not putting my boat in the water. I didn't want to risk getting sick, going into the tournament. So I just took the day off, got all my equipment ready to go. Kind of had my mind made up of where I wanted to fish. So we just jumped into that spot and rode it for 2 days.
Well, did it have a lot of current or anything in that area? What kind of really struck out about that area to you?
It was actually a current break, and I didn't really notice it until the first day of the tournament. I idled in there and started fishing, pre-fishing. I idled in there all the way to the back because that's where the deepest water was, and I thought that's where the fish would be in the winter. And turns out first day of the tournament, I started working my way back out into the cove a little bit, and there was one point that stuck out, and it was breaking the current. Once I got outside of that, I noticed, hey, there's current on these stumps. We need to move back in. So it was a current break that had all the fish in that area kind of tucked in there up against the bank, trying to get away from that moving water.
I know what we heard up at Grizzly last week. Sorry about that. Is how finicky those fish were. What was some of the ways that you actually got them to bite? Because I know everybody was scratching their heads.
Yeah, it was definitely the toughest bite that I've ever fished for. Those 2 days, I've never seen crappie act the way those were acting. Most of the time when you get on a big crappie and you do something wrong, he's going to run off. Well, these wouldn't. They would just sit there. And you would almost think at some point they were a fake crappie. It wasn't even a real fish sitting next to the trees, because you could do whatever you wanted to the fish and he wouldn't even react. He wouldn't move. You could reach down there and touch him with the jig and actually hit the fish, and he would just kind of move over a little bit, like, I don't want to eat that. Get it away from me. I just kept moving around on fish. I would get on a fish, mess with him for a couple minutes. If I didn't get a reaction, I would just keep going, looking for a new fish. And every now and then you would get on one that showed a little bit of interest when you first showed him the bait. So then I would sit down on those fish and kind of mess with them a little bit, and sometimes trigger a reaction.
Like when you actually got a reaction, what was the bite afterwards? Was it they just kind of nosed them up, or did they actually come up and attack them? Or
no, the fish were butted up right up next to trees. Their nose was actually stuck to the tree, and you had to get your bait right there in between the tree and the fish's nose. And if he nosed up, it was so slow, super slow. He would just ease up maybe 2 inches. And you couldn't take the bait away from him. You couldn't move the bait once he did that. You just had to hold it right on his nose. And every now and then you would feel the slightest little bit of pressure. I didn't feel a bite for 2 days. I would just feel a little bit of pressure. And you just set the hook and hope the fish was there.
On bait wise, can you really let out what bait you use?
I fished
something special, or just the same old stuff?
Just some 16-ounce hair jigs. I'm a big hair jig guy. I fished muddy watercolors. We had 3 or 4 inches of visibility. Your oranges, your chartreuses, a little bit of purple.
What we've been using all winter.
Basically so, yeah.
I know we got a question right here from Tracy, and he's wanting to ask, what kind of braid, and if so, what kind of braid? Do you use braid?
I do not use a braid. I use a 15-pound fluorocarbon.
In a particular brand, or just?
Right now I'm actually I'm using some Seaguar Red Label that I found on clearance at Walmart back when we were building bicycles. So
I recall that, and he bought every spool.
I bought 20 or 30 spools of it, so I'm still using that
up. Let's see if I got any more questions. I'm sure it's some in here. All right. I got one from YouTube right here. I'm going to pop it on the screen, if you can read that. Hayden, what is your advice for a huge crappie that is not wanting to bite?
That can be very difficult. Big crappie don't want to bite most of the time. Every now and then you'll catch one off guard and he'll bite as soon as he sees the bait. But you kind of just have to read the fish's reaction, see how he reacts to the bait. If it's a negative reaction or a positive reaction, and then go from there.
I see these fish too, and of course, I'm not necessarily looking for a big fish like you will, but Is there a variation? Do you see like some days the big fish have a different bite compared to these smaller fish?
Most every day, a big fish has a different bite than a little crappie. Like ACT at Darbone 2 weeks ago, the big fish didn't want to bite at all. So I just quit fishing for them, and I just started fishing for those little juvenile 1 pound fish, and they would bite basically every time I put it in front of them. It's definitely much more difficult to trick a really big crappie than it is to trick a 12-inch fish.
I've got a question. When do you want to go to Texas?
I'll be in Texas for the Crappie Masters on Lake Fork at the end of March, early April.
Have you ever been to Fort?
I have not. I like that question. Yeah.
Mike Shepard, why do you put your rod tip down in the water at times?
So this last tournament, the reason I put my rod tip down in the water while I was fishing was because my shoulder is still not healed from the ACT, and holding that big heavy rod all day started wearing on me. So I could set the tip in the edge of the water, and it would take just a little bit of that weight off, so I could hold that rod a little better.
I've been telling him about that shoulder too. I told him he needs to go to physical therapy. He can afford it now for sure. All right, here's a good question here. That's another YouTube question here. What helps you pick a spot to start chasing those roamers? Do you just go anywhere, or what makes a key in a certain